Collins, Artistic Director of Plays at the Arvada Center in the Black Box.
I'm Sean Scrutchins. I play Squealer and Mr. Jones in Animal Farm.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. I was going to start with a question for you about this play. This novel was originally written as an allegory for the Russian Revolution. Curious about, in your prep for doing this play, did you study up on the Russian Revolution, any of that?
Not at all. But I did read the book, and it was a required reading for high school. So I hadn't touched it in like 20 plus years. But reading it now, having lived more of the world now, I see so much relevance. And like you said, like it is neutral, but that's what's great about the audience coming and seeing this play is they can pick and choose what's relevant to them. It could be foreign, it could be domestic. It can be applied to anything as a cautionary tale. So that was kind of my big prep, was reading the play and also just kind of understanding how we activate an allegory, because the book is so narrative, there's really not like actual dialogue. So how we can activate the story, that was kind of where my emphasis was.
Right, yeah. Right. Speaking of which, this is a very different kind of play to rehearse and to be in than a sort of traditional narrative, a traditional dialogue-driven play with characters that go through a journey and change and grow. Mm-hmm. So approach-wise, as an actor, how is it different? How do you sort of prep and approach the process?
It's a very different approach in that so much of the work happens in the room because you're building things. You're building a windmill. You're figuring out how you can activate a narration, a line that is just a narration. It's not actually like your normal storytelling. So much of the journey happens like, well, how can we best adapt this? And it can completely change the next rehearsal. So much of what the process was as an actor is coming in with ideas, but also allowing a grace to let things adapt over time, because there were characters that we had to cut along with the process. Lines would change as we go. So there was a great amount of adaptability and you'd have to trust that the end product would get there. With other productions, the end product comes pretty quickly. With this one, we had to trust that we would eventually get there. And once we started adding tech, that changed things. So as an actor, I had to be a little bit more patient than a normal production would. But also, there was a great freeing that we could make it our own story as we went. And usually when you come in day one, there is a specific story that and you have to do it a certain way. And so there was a great freedom to it than other productions would have.
Yeah, it's interesting talking to different people in the cast, people who have done, like you have, classically trained as you are, and you've done a lot of rep, you've done a lot of kind of character popping sort of work, and a few of people in the cast who haven't, who have done kind of more traditional sort of beginning, middle, end plays with that, had to find their way through it, I think, a little bit more than actors who have done a little bit more of this kind of work. Doing Shakespeare prepares you for doing Animal Farm in a way, doesn't it?
Totally. I mean, these are big, we tried to make these animals human-like because we want to empathize with the human quality that they have, but also they're big characters, and you can't really be subtle with an allegory. You kind of have to make big choices, and it's similar to Shakespeare. Shakespeare characters, there's not a lot of subtlety in Shakespeare. They're big characters with big existential crisis and threat, and so you kind of have to come in with a level 11, sometimes.
Yeah, very, very true. And it doesn't sort of sneak up on you. There it is.
Yeah.
You've got to make that choice. Speaking of animals, although you're all playing animals, you're not playing animals in a lot of ways. One of my funny stories, I don't think I've shared this with you, is when we were doing auditions, a lot of the actors prepared animal sounds as part of their auditions. Yeah. So they came in and did their sort of first audition piece with snorts and moos and clucks really built into the thing. And Jessica didn't want snorts and moos and clucks. Yeah. So then she'd give them a note saying, let's go back and do that again. We don't need the moos. Mm-hmm. And you would just watch actors' faces just fall. Like they were so happy with their snort and their wink.
Yeah, I mean that happens. I think that we quickly learned that we wanted to, humanize them as best as we could. And there's little sounds, kind of intermittence, but it's not constant. I think if it was constant, then we'd be banging the nail too hard, and I think we would burn out the audience. I think there's a constant reminder that they're animals, but I think we as humans, we want to empathize more with humans.
Yeah.
But you'll find them here and there. It's subtle. It's very subtle.
It is. Yeah, and I like that quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think that was the right choice on her part. Wondering about when you first read the play, knowing you were auditioning for it and thinking it might be something you were working on. What about it is appealing right now? What felt sort of worth doing in the moment?
Reading this book, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so relevant. And so there was this feeling of, this is a story that everyone needs to see, because everyone can pull things that to their own life and what they've seen in the world. And so it's a show that everything we're going through as a society, the whole global society, we can learn from this. And so it's so rare that you have a piece in the theater that's like, this is happening now, this has happened then, it will happen again, we need to do it now. There are great comedies, there are great tragedies that have relevance, but this one specifically to what we've been through as a country the last year, the last 5 years before, it's super relevant. And so I feel like it's a play that the audience needs to see, to learn, and then it's, once again, it's a cautionary tale as well, so learn for the future as well.
Yeah, I was, the morning we opened, I got up and turned on the news and was watching a Putin press conference about, that was sort of the first real day of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and thinking, who could have known? I chose this play actually pre-COVID, because it was supposed to be in the season that was canceled for COVID, and it felt current to me then for various reasons, but in this particular moment, especially because we're back focused on Russia, and this is a play originally based upon an allegory about that revolution, and the failures of that revolution are a huge part of what's happening today in Ukraine. It's all, it's all connected in lots of ways. So it felt, I joked with somebody, as sadly you can never be out of fashion by assuming somebody will do something horrible. And it's sad, but it's this play feels really important to me right now as we get, I have friends in Russia who are sharing with me some of the media that they're getting in Russia, and it's Napoleon and Squealer. It's the propaganda that we see in Animal Farm.
Yeah, it's the propaganda and spreading of false information, but also this kind of fear of the other. Yeah. And that's peppered throughout this show of the fear of the enemy, the fear of Snowball, the traitor, this kind of constant dehumanization of the person on the other farm, which is something that every country in this world should learn, that we are all the same, no matter what farm we're on, we are all the same.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I was going to ask you next about your casting, because you double as the farmer, the human farmer Jones, and then as the king of all propaganda, Squealer. So you're sort of on both sides of the fight. How was that? Was it that sort of a fun double?
Yeah. I always love doubling in plays because I try to find an antithesis. What's the big difference? How variety showing. So the audience never, is that the same person? So it was fun to play. Yeah, there is the clear enemy of Jones from the very beginning, but how can I make a more subtle enemy that seems like a nice guy and could be your friend, and he wouldn't lie to you, he wouldn't, do horrible things. He's charming, and that's actually the first line is Squealer was a fat little porker with twinkling eyes. He was a brilliant talker. So how I can play that, a sort of manipulation that you don't see early on. It's a manipulation that slowly reveals throughout the show, and that's kind of that going to a point of the whole analogy of turning up a pot, like the temperature that gets so hot that before you know it, it's so hot you can't get out. And that's kind of where I went with Squealer, was a slow burn that you don't see early on, and that by the time that you realize it's too late. So that was a fun journey for Squealer.
Yeah, he really is. He's just awful.
Yeah.
Bless you. He's just such a horribly, it's that, the charm as just a weapon of such terror in the end, because he doesn't seem at all dangerous. He seems, of the three pigs who take charge, he seems absolutely the most safe. Yeah. At the beginning. Logan's Napoleon is big, and he has a big deep voice, and he carries a lot of that weight, and Lavor's Snowball is kind of a warrior, and Squealer feels like he's the reasonable man. He's the one of the triumvirate who's gonna sort of take care of reason.
And I think that's true to life, because I mean, dictators, they can be charming.
Yeah,
often, and that's how people are lured, and they're tempted, because there's the fear element, but there's also the dear leader element of charm and love for their people. And I mean, if everyone knew that dictators were horrible monsters, we wouldn't have horrible monster dictators. It's usually because it's too late.
Yeah, so true. Sort of the simple lesson is, whenever they tell you they're doing it for your own good, run. Right.
Yes.
It's just everything is about saving you and protecting you, and protecting the animals on the farm, and they want so much. You know, what breaks your heart about Animal Farm is it starts off so hopefully, and they're so just like many revolutions, so on board to really change their society and the values. And I think they all believe in those values, even the pigs at the beginning.
Yeah.
The values are to make a better world, and how easily undone that is.
Through greed and corruption.
Yeah, and that taste of power, man. Mm-hmm. That little taste of power is just something. Last question I was going to ask you is about doing this play in rep. So this is part of a 3-rep season. You are in The Liar, which opened first. How does it, when you're doing a rep play, how does that affect the process and how you feel as an actor in the room?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me, like, how do you know the lines? Like, how do you know what show you're doing? And it really is, when you come into this space, you just click into a world. The Liar's a completely different world than Animal Farm, but it's a different energy when you come into the space. We do a fight call, we warm up. It feels like, even though it's the same space, it feels like a different world. So there is a difference in weight. Sometimes when I'm coming in Animal Farm, I'm like, oh man, like this is a tougher show, so I really got to focus. Whereas Liar, you come in, it's like, oh, I just got to stretch, because it's a lot more physical. And so you're just kind of tuning into a different world. It's a different frequency. So how you prep for that when you come in. Animal Farm, I run lines because I kind of talk more in Animal Farm. But with Liar, it's more physical, so I stretch the body, prepare the body more. But the end journey, though, it's always the reaction of the audience. There's a different energy for the Liar's audience. They're all laughs, whereas Animal Farm, you get the kind of like, oh, like kind of emotional gut reactions. There's some laughter in there, but it's just, even though it's a different world, I look forward to that kind of audience reaction and that kind of relationship. It's just different sounds that they're making.
Yeah. No, that's why I am so in favor of repertory, because you're seeing actors take on really different kinds of projects as an audience and sharing a different journey. I'm also really struck by the relationships that form, like, for example, you and Noelia. So in The Liar, you're lovers. Yeah. You're a hilariously well-matched couple in a sad way. Whereas you are her tormentor in many ways in Animal Farm. And just being in the room watching rehearsal, and that you guys have this great chemistry that you built in Liar that I'm seeing in Animal Farm, that there's a depth of relationship between the actors.
Yeah, totally. And you know, in Liar, there's sometimes I don't share the stage with anybody. Like there's characters that I don't really see until the very, very end when everyone's on stage. Whereas Animal Farm, we're on stage together the whole time. So it's nice that, you know, I had a connection with Noelia in Liar, but then I made better connections with the other castmates in Animal Farm because we had more stage time together.
Yeah.
So the relationship, and it was also nice to open the romantic comedy first before we got to the gut-wrenching trauma of this.
Yeah.
Because we've created such a safe environment of play with Liar that we could approach this darker, heavy material in a very loving and supportive way because we got so close through the Liar.
Thanks so much for coming to see Animal Farm. Hope you'll check out the other 2 plays in the rep if you haven't already. Stickfly opens on March 18th. Hope to see you there.